Professor Michael. Oh, sorry. Are we recording? There we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe I'll start again. So Anthony Shemaria is going to share with us in this third round of presentations. He's a religious studies major and he's minoring in English. You're an honors student as well. And his presentation is entitled Crystal Clear. In his senior year, he's written a work of historical fiction about Jewish New York City police officers in the interwar period, I think between the First and Second World Wars. And he had also written that he's planning on attending graduate school in fall 2023. I'm interested to hear where you're planning on going. But in any event, Anthony Shemaria.
Hello. So yeah, thank you everyone for presenting. They were amazing. I just want to say that off the bat. So yeah, my name's Anthony. I'm a creative writing major, minor in English. My presentation is about a short story that I wrote that is probably going to be part of a longer novel. The style of my presentation is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to Fresno State in the fall as a MFA candidate. I'm actually a poet, so this ended up coming out. I was trying to find the story that I wanted to tell for this presentation. I ended up linking with Dr. Michael Alexander, who is a scholar of religious studies. He's the Maimonides chair. He's written books about Jewish history in America. And so after talking to him and having novel recommendations from him, I switched track from, I wanted to write a piece of autofiction about like being from California, to wanting to write something about being Jewish is where it started. And then just coincidentally, I started getting kind of fixated on the interwar period, where the interwar period is between World War I and World War II, but specifically the period of time in the late 30s, mid to late 30s, right before the outbreak of World War II. So I was watching all kinds of movies and documentaries, and I was going through New York Times articles and New York State Public Library articles, all of these different things, and looking at pictures. And I found this character named Max Finkelstein, Captain Max Finkelstein, real person, who was put in charge of a police unit by Mayor LaGuardia of New York City to guard the German embassy in New York, in Manhattan. And it was going to be made of all Jewish police officers. So I kind of was fascinated in this. I couldn't find a lot about him. He has a very tragic story, actually. He ended up committing suicide not long after this. So I decided to create a new character named Solomon Ben Asher, who, sorry, I forgot to set my Solomon Ben Asher, who is the focus of this first chapter and talk about their relationship. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read from the story, and you're welcome to read along with me. Give me 1 second. Can you see this new screen now, or do I need to switch it over?
I'm seeing your title screen right now.
I got it. All right. So this is the first chapter of Crystal Clear. War is the locomotive of history. Trot. The concrete was slick with morning dew as Solomon Ben Asher plodded down the Bowery in his size 11 duty issue boot. Though he had spent all 45 years of his life on the other side of the East River, during his childhood he wandered many afternoons, hand in hand with his grandfather, through lower Manhattan. The wide paths of Belgian blocks, shared by carriages, motor cars, and weary pedestrians, mixing in front of his eyes, as he learned to love New York. Now all this darn concrete made the ache in his ankles scream as the echoes of street vendors, construction workers, and neighing horses bounced off glass and steel, even at 6:30 in the morning. He waved to Mr. Lee, one of the proprietors he still knew from his beat days, his mouth watering as smells of freshly roasted pork and other Chinese delicacies thickened on the chill. Solly made the turn through Columbus Park, looking up at the 17 stories of the new Manhattan court building, wondering if even it would be big enough for the job. Though it had still been dark when he'd stepped out of his East Flatbush brownstone entranceway, he swore at the gray sky and its damn late November cold, Gilda holding their youngest Abram on the stoop, calling to him to be safe, even though all shift Sully would be making sure a bunch of Meshuggah didn't break out between the Walling Kvetches and the equally crazy Pashudniks of the consulate. Plus, Sully had to get up too early before his stomach would settle enough for him to eat. Thankfully, Eli the cornman had decided to start his own day of selling roast cobs near the precinct, so Sully had been able to buy an ear, which he chomped and grumbled through while letting the warm juice cut through the harsh Manhattan wind as he walked toward the southern tip of the island. In normal times, the lieutenant wouldn't be walking the streets. Sergeant Ben Asher had done his 10 years on patrol, finally earning his promotion and glorious days standing at the front desk. Unfortunately, the only thing routine these days was his mother praying over him, the same way she had since he could remember having him bend down to kiss his receding hair as he left home. Thank Hashem, we left that awful country, she moaned, waving to his back as he hurried to catch the cue. Sergeant Solomon Solly Ben Asher, the desk sergeant of NYPD's 5th Precinct, who relished directing daily foot traffic of the South Manhattan Police Station or training officer on the finer points of being a cop. But not anymore. Captain Maxim made it clear that he wanted his Shomrim squad to be like the Untouchables, only better, and Jewish. No more Mayflower donuts at 10 a.m. for Lieutenant Solomon. No more yelling at Winky to get moving out from the break room to his beat where the lazy officer was pretending to do paperwork. No, for the last 2 months, little Sully was tasked with spending his shifts walking down Lower Manhattan to Battery Park and protecting the last group of nudniks he ever imagined he'd see in New York. Nazis. Hey, want a paper, officer? A newsboy shouted from a stand. Wait, you aren't Gregor. Where's the old mensch? Solomon turned to take the offered time, said, looking the youth up and down. Ah, that's my Gramps. He is sitting shiva for a neighbor, so my mom made me use Sunday to watch this dusty place, the kid said, stopping himself mid-spit to kick at imaginary rocks on the pavement. What's your name, son? Solomon asked as he began to scan the headlines. Moshe Greenwald, sir. I think I go to school with your daughter. Solomon didn't like the faint look of hopefulness that crossed the young teenager's face, but he didn't have time to playfully interrogate the boy. He would be sure the next time he saw the skinny teen to give him a little scare. Reich asked Washington to help pay for deporting German Jews, insist Jews leave penniless. Sorry for the language. These fucking cherries. Solomon caught himself saying as Moshe stared at him in disbelief that a copper would swear in front of him. I hate him too, sir. The boy turned to re-enter his grandfather's stall, removing his flat cap to reveal dirty blonde hair his family probably took from them, with them after centuries in the Rhineland. Solomon reached into his pocket, flicked his friend's grandson a nickel, feeling a sense of respect. Maybe he wouldn't mess with the kid next time. He sighed. Maybe. Have a good day, son. Keep the change. The lieutenant glanced at the gold wristwatch Gilda had given him for his birthday. Hurry his pace as he folded the morning paper under his arm. The consulate was across from Battery Park, and even though it was barely 7:30 in the morning, as Lieutenant Solomon turned off Broadway onto Battery Place, he was grateful to see that no crowd had formed in front of the park, across from the tall stairs that led up to the multi-tenant office building. How large would the smattering of protesters be today, standing like soldiers under the shade of pines and birches, their benches framing the old sandstone wall of Castle Clinton, looming deep in the center of the park. Baruch Hashem, Soli, you can talk some sense into this guy, said, cheeks more red than usual. Solomon quickly scanned the scene. While the designated protest space was empty, the front of the building was not. Blocking the stairs was the stout frame of Officer Matayahu Madi Wazinski, a street cop, calling to God and his superior to intervene. He was surrounded by 3 elderly women, 2 of them whom Solomon had never met, and one who was nice to him, but made any suspected member of the Reich foolish enough to approach on foot, take a wide berth around her. Unless, of course, they wanted to shower in grandmotherly spittle-filled German cuss words. So dirty a victim would require an ear bath after her assault. Gesticulating in front of the 3 women was the lawyer Jerry Siegel, a nice enough criminal defense attorney who unfortunately found himself running a law office out of the same building as a bunch of Bavarian anti-Semites, the cause of the daily trouble for the Jewish officers of the 5th Precinct. When the Nazis had begun to announce to the world their intention for Jewish Germans living in the Third Reich, the lawyer had been kind enough to shut down his practice so that he could join the crowd of fellow New Yorkers as they began their daily vigil of sign holding and hand wringing in front of the park. As if conducting the Brooklyn Jewish men's choir, Sully raised one leather-gloved hand to silence the quartet while leading his man slightly out of earshot of the soon-to-be multiplying crowd of protesters. All right, Maddie, what's the commotion this fine Sunday morning? The lieutenant, feeling the waves of anger crashing at his back, listened, letting his subordinate take a break from the fracas. Maddie had been sitting in his home-brought lawn chair at the base of the stairs since midnight when his shift started, waiting to start standing until he absolutely had to. He may have accidentally fallen asleep around 5 a.m. Maddie knew it couldn't have been sooner because he saw a familiar cleaning lady enter the building. This immediately made Solomon glad that the captain wasn't here yet, because one thing the Russian Jew was not was understanding of officers that fell asleep on the job. Anyway, Maddie continued, after Solomon made him stop making excuses and get on with his story, he woke up to Mrs. Whiteberg. He nodded toward one of the angry grandmothers in a red scarf, yelling at Herr Meyer, the assistant to a vice ambassador. For some fracasta reason, the mustachioed Aryan had decided to engage in verbal combat with the widowed pogrom survivor, something anyone would have instantly seen as a losing battle. Unaccustomed to being loud, the German voice attracted the rapid footsteps of 2 more matronly estries merging through the fog. The known protest ringleader, Mrs. Schuster, and her equally rabid commandant, Mrs. Emmentaler. Becoming a pair of slippered torpedoes, the 2 flanked Mrs. Whiteberg, scuttling any last defensive the Nazi statement was planning. Meanwhile, according to the brave Jewish knights, Maddie was vociferously demanding that the combatants separate. This, Solomon was sure, did not happen, and it took little imagination to have visions of the young officer standing dumbfounded while being transfixed by the memories of his own grandmother chiding him, while contemplating the long-term consequences of Jewish guilt. But to Officer Wazensky's chagrin, even though the German had begun to make a backward retreat towards the steps, the 3 women continued their frontal assault. At that point, the lawyer Siegel had mysteriously emerged at the top of the stairs. The lawyer, Maddie swore, must have been sleeping in his office because Maddie absolutely wasn't napping when Siegel slipped into the building. And all that. So the story goes on to show how this community of Jewish protesters formed and the conflict between Solomon and Captain Finkelstein, and both internal for them and external within doing their jobs, and also feeling responsible as Jews to not protect these Germans that are actively telling the world to hate. That is pretty much the gist of my presentation. Are there any questions?